In this unit, we're going to talk about suicide prevention. This is a topic most of us never want to discuss, and most people are extremely fearful of talking about. I decided to go ahead and use slides from work for this and just add the background in because this is such an incredibly important topic for us. I'm speaking to you more than as just your brother and your fellow Sir Knight. This time I'm also speaking to you in my role as a professor. If we look at suicide, men are usually about twice as likely than women to commit suicide. But one of the things that holds true and is increasingly common is that older adults are much more likely than younger adults, with a few exceptions. You might notice the highest line here, the most likely to commit suicide is 75 and over, especially those with terminal diseases, especially those who have lost loved ones. As a gerontologist, one of the realities that I have always faced is that the average woman who is widowed lasts an average of about 20 years. The average male who loses his wife lasts about 18 months. Whether it's because he dies of a broken heart or whether he dies of suicide, that's one of the big things. You might not recognize as quickly that age group of 45 to 64 is increasing in its likelihood to commit suicide. Right before the pandemic, there was some alleviation of this, but the new numbers look like they are starting to go up again. As people worry about their jobs, they worry about their lives, they worry about their reputations. Unfortunately, if no intervention occurs, people are more likely in this day and age to commit suicide. Rather than reinventing the wheel, I tend to use the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline as a great way to describe things, and that way it also unifies the message. Their system is a little different from what we usually use in clinical psych, but at the same time, this is more common, and I want you to have a unified theme so that you can use this as a resource, and then you're not at odds with what I'm saying. In many areas, 988 has become a new emergency helpline, just like 911 is for physical emergencies. Not all areas, unfortunately, have the 988 number. There are 5 basic steps to help someone avoid committing suicide. We don't want them to. We're going to go through each one of these 5. First, if you care about someone, or if you're just a decent human being, be willing to ask the hard questions. Now, one of the first things that I have to tell my students is if you ask someone about this, make sure you understand you cannot plant seeds in their mind for suicide. That is the single largest cause of people avoiding the question. It's not that we are cold, uncaring, insensitive individuals, as a general rule. It is that people are afraid to ask about suicide because they don't want to feel guilty if the person commits suicide and they think they planted the seed. If you just ask someone, you are much more likely to reduce their chance of committing suicide. If you ask them, though, be willing to listen. And then, if you're willing to listen, don't judge them. It is okay if someone thinks about something. It doesn't make them a bad person. It means that they don't understand they have options, that they have people who care about them. You become the person who they see just by being willing to listen to them. Never make promises, and within the fraternity, this becomes a big problem for us. Don't promise to keep their secrets about suicide. if they ask you to, this becomes a question of obligation, because that is also at your discretion. Don't put your reasons for them to stay alive as the top priorities. Ask theirs. Most of the time, they feel their lives are not valid because they don't get to be listened to. Ask, be willing to listen. And then you have to be there. If you're going to talk to them, you're going to ask them questions, you need to actually follow through. You need to check in with them. And there are probably going to have to be other people involved. You can't be with them 24/7. And if we are brothers and sisters who love one another, then there are times where we need to work together. And if you run out of ideas, call. It doesn't have to be the suicidal person calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or 988. You can do it too and say, I have this friend and I'm talking with them, but I'm out of ideas. They will help you. They're quite good at it and quite well trained. Remember that you have to be there to help them connect, to remember people actually care about them, that they have hope. In teaching seminary courses, I occasionally remind people that in the Bible, there are difficulties in translating, at times, one word, tikva. Tikva is the word for a cord, but it's also the word for hope, because hope is a cord. It ties the present to the future, it ties the past to the present, and it ties us together. Make sure that you are there for them to help them have hope. And then by having these connections to you, it will avoid the ideas becoming realities and actions of suicide. Keep people safe. If someone tells you they're considering committing suicide, don't be afraid to say, well, how are you thinking of doing it? What keeps crossing your mind? And if they have a plan, say, well, rather than have that 1911 or, other pistol or whatever not be handed down to your family, how about you give that to me for a little while and I'm going to hold it for you and we'll talk about this, and when you want it back, we'll give it back. But for right now, just to help you avoid that thought, okay? If it's pills, if it's whatever, if it's the rope, then just take it away from them or get them to give it to you with an assurance. You're not doing anything. You're not doing anything bad. You're not doing anything to, absolutely disempower them. You're just giving them some time. But it's also okay to say, you need to go with me to the emergency room or a police station. Now, the police station is a very much last resort as a general rule, because the police are typically overworked. Yes, they're very good people, but we also don't want someone getting very upset in a police station where they're being brought to get help and they cause such disruption that they wind up suiciding by cop. So therefore, absolute last course of action. If you can remove the way they're planning on committing suicide, remove it. But make sure that you're continuing to talk to them, being there, connecting with them, showing that you care about them. Next is helping them to connect, not just with you, but others. We are in a fraternity. We're supposed to love one another. Even if we don't always like one another, we work through it because of the love that we have, the shared values, the cherished ideals. Listen to people. Don't judge them. Don't impose your views. If someone says they're suicidal, don't start telling them about how that automatically sends them to hell or something like that. That's not the point. The point is they feel unlistened to. They feel lonely. They feel disconnected. Listen to their reasons. Listen to their views. And then see how you can help them build up networks. And again, if you are not sure, call and get help. And then follow up. Don't just be an intervention person. Don't just be there for the moment when they are suicidal. Continue. Yes, this is yet another reason why people don't want to be burdened with intervening, because then they feel an obligation and they have to be close friends with that person. Well, aren't you brothers? Aren't you sisters? Is this person not part of your family of love? Call them, stop by and visit. Text them or write them, whatever it is. Make sure that you show that you care and that you are a part of their lives. The lives being lonely is one of the biggest reasons. Even if they're around a lot of people, it might be that they are lonely. Those simple connections decrease the likelihood of them ending their own lives. So from this very quick lecture, I want you to make sure that you are considering how to listen to people. It's sometimes extremely difficult to understand someone's perspective. But listen, and then listen with kindness. Don't tell them about your thoughts. Don't tell them about your struggles. It's about them. You've heard this many times during this course. It's not about you. It's about them. And then knowing that this brother or sister is hurting, make sure that you are willing to be more of a part of their lives than a part of their death. Get help, and get help for yourself as well. It may not seem it, but it can be incredibly exhausting to have to work with people who are suicidal. It's not your fault if they are suicidal. Help them. Help them. Help them most by listening and loving them.